A group of ordinary families set out on a journey that promised a better life. Children, businessmen, dreamers. Like thousands of Americans at the time, they wanted to travel west to California, a land advertised as rich with opportunity. What they didn't know was that their journey would become one of the most horrifying survival stories in American history. Snowstorms and impossible choices. This is the true story of the Donner Party. The year was 1846. America was expanding rapidly. Many believed it was their destiny to move west and settle new lands. California, which was still part of Mexico when the journey began, was becoming a dream destination. Stories spread across the country, describing fertile farmland, mild weather, and endless opportunities. For families struggling in the East and Midwest, California sounded like paradise. Among those dreaming of a better future were two brothers, George Donner and Jacob Donner. Both were respected farmers from Illinois. They had large families and hoped California would provide a brighter future for their children. In April of 1846, they joined a wagon train heading west. At first, everything seemed normal. The immigrants followed established trails that thousands had traveled before them. The journey was difficult but manageable. Days were spent guiding wagons. Nights were spent around campfires. Children played while adults discussed the future. Nobody could imagine the nightmare waiting ahead. As the wagon train traveled west, travelers began hearing about a new route, a shortcut. It had been promoted by a man named Lansford Hastings. Hastings claimed his route could save travelers hundreds of miles. He described it as faster and easier. Many immigrants became interested. Who wouldn't want a shorter trip? The Donner families eventually decided to take the shortcut. It was a decision that would change everything. There was one major problem. Very few people had actually traveled the road. Some experienced travelers warned it might be dangerous, but the promise of saving time was too tempting. The Donners and several other families separated from the main wagon train. They began following Hastings' route. At first, things seemed fine. Then the problem started. The shortcut wasn't really a shortcut. Instead of saving time, it forced the travelers through rough terrain that had never been properly tested for wagon travel. Massive obstacles appeared everywhere. Dense forests, rocky mountains, unmapped wilderness. The travelers had to stop repeatedly to clear paths for their wagons. Every delay cost valuable time, and time was something they could not afford to lose. The most dangerous section of Hastings' route led directly into the Great Salt Desert. Today, we know it as part of Utah's Salt Flats. At the time, it was a terrifying expanse of barren land. There was almost no water, almost no vegetation, no shelter, no easy escape. The emigrants entered the desert believing they could cross it in a few days. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a nightmare. The summer heat was brutal. Water supplies disappeared rapidly. Oxen became exhausted. Horses collapsed. Wagons broke down. Many animals died where they stood. Families watched helplessly as their resources vanished. Some travelers wandered in search of water. Others tried desperately to save their livestock. The desert crossing took far longer than expected. When they finally emerged, they had lost precious days, valuable animals, and much-needed supplies. The shortcut had become a disaster, but the worst was still ahead. As summer turned to autumn, the travelers faced a frightening reality. They were behind schedule, very behind schedule. Experienced pioneers knew that crossing the Sierra Nevada mountains after early snowfall could be deadly. The mountains formed one of the final obstacles before California. If the travelers became trapped there during winter, survival would be nearly impossible. Rough terrain, every obstacle delayed them further. Some travelers became nervous. Surely they could reach California before heavy snow arrived. But nature had other plans. In late October of 1846, the Donner Party reached the Sierra Nevada mountains. They were exhausted, but California was finally within reach. Only one major obstacle remained. Then disaster struck. A massive snowstorm arrived earlier than expected. Within hours, deep snow covered the mountain passes. The emigrants attempted to continue, but their wagons couldn't move. Visibility disappeared. The travelers realized they were trapped. The route ahead was blocked. The route behind was blocked. Winter had sealed them inside the mountains. Many believed the storm would pass. Instead, more snow arrived. Soon, snowdrifts reached incredible heights. The mountain passes vanished beneath layers of ice and snow. Escape became impossible. With limited food and an entire winter ahead, the travelers knew they needed shelter immediately. Several families constructed crude log cabins near a lake. Others built makeshift structures from whatever materials they could find. Conditions were miserable. The cabins were overcrowded. Cold winds found their way through cracks in the walls. Food supplies continued shrinking. Each day, people rationed what little they had. Meals became smaller, then almost non-existent. Hunting offered little help. Wild game was scarce during winter. The snow made travel difficult. Many animals had already migrated. Weeks passed, then months. Children cried from hunger. Adults grew weaker. Hope slowly faded. The settlers began to realize they might not survive until spring, and that realization terrified everyone. At first, the stranded families believed they could survive the winter. They had cabins, they had some food, and they had each other. But hope is fragile when reality begins to set in. Days turned into weeks, and the snow never stopped falling. Every storm buried more of their supplies. Every cold night drained more of their strength. The Donner Party had originally started with over 80 people, but now, trapped in the mountains, they were slowly realizing a painful truth. They were running out of everything: food, fuel, medicine, and time. To survive, they began strict rationing. But even rationing could not change the fact that there simply wasn't enough. By midwinter, hunger became constant. At first, people ate what little livestock remained, then dogs, then anything they could find. But soon there was nothing left. Inside the cabins, silence replaced conversation. Children cried less, not because they were okay, but because they were too weak. Adults stopped moving as much to conserve energy. Every decision became about survival. Should you eat today or save it for tomorrow? But tomorrow never brought more food, only more hunger and more snow. As January arrived, the first members of the group began to die. Weakness turned into collapse. Illness spread easily in the cramped, freezing cabins. There was no doctor who could truly help them. No medicine strong enough. Each death hit the group hard, not only emotionally, but practically. Because every loss meant fewer people to help gather firewood, melt snow, or care for the children. The survivors began to realize something terrifying. Death was no longer rare, it was becoming normal. In the darkest moment, a desperate plan was created. A small group of strong volunteers would attempt to cross the mountains on foot. They would carry snowshoes made from hides and branches. They would travel through impossible terrain, and they would try to reach California for help. This group became known as the Forlorn Hope. There was almost no expectation of success. In fact, many believed it was a suicide mission, but it was their only chance, because if no one reached help, everyone would die. The group of roughly 17 men, women, and guides prepared to leave. Some were already weak, others had no idea what they were walking into, but they left anyway, into the white silence of the mountains. The Forlorn Hope faced conditions beyond imagination. Snow deeper than their knees, winds that blinded them instantly, freezing temperatures that burned the skin like fire. They struggled to find even basic direction. At times, they could not see their own hands in front of their faces. Food ran out quickly. Then they began eating leather, shoes, belts, anything that could provide even a trace of strength. One by one, members began to fall behind, and one by one, they disappeared into the storm. The group realized a horrifying truth. Even this rescue attempt might fail. Back in the camps, conditions worsened rapidly. The remaining survivors were now too weak to hunt, too weak to gather wood, too weak to even leave their cabins for long, but also trapped them like a prison wall. Inside the cabins, People began to lose track of days. Time no longer mattered. Only survival mattered, and survival was slipping away. As February approached, hope was fading completely. No word had come from the forlorn hope. No rescue had arrived. The remaining settlers were caught between two fears: that no help was coming, or that help would come too late. Inside the snow-covered mountains, the Donner Party waited, and slowly, the line between hope and despair disappeared. The rescue could not save everyone at once. The snow was still too deep, the journey too dangerous, so the survivors were taken out in small groups. Each trip back down the mountains was slow and painful. Some survivors walked, others had to be carried. Children were prioritized first, then the weakest adults. Every trip meant risking another storm. Every trip meant deciding who could leave and who had to wait. Inside the camps, those left behind waited in fear, not knowing if rescuers would return or if they would be abandoned to the winter forever. As the rescue continued, rescuers began noticing disturbing signs inside the camps. Empty remains of livestock, signs of extreme starvation. The truth was difficult to process. Many survivors refused to speak about what happened during the worst weeks. Some memories were too painful, others were too controversial. For years, rumors spread about how people survived the final stretch of the winter. But the survivors themselves rarely spoke clearly about those moments. Trauma had buried much of the truth. By late spring of 1847, the last survivors were finally brought out of the mountains. The snow was melting. The nightmare was ending, but not everyone had survived. Out of the original group of more than 80 travelers, only about half made it out alive. Families had been destroyed. Children had been lost. Entire family lines were erased by the winter. The survivors who reached California were changed forever. Physically weakened, emotionally scarred, and carrying memories they would never forget. When news of the Donner Party spread, the public reacted with shock. Some saw them as victims of bad luck. Others blamed poor decisions. The idea that ordinary pioneers could become trapped and nearly wiped out by nature terrified many Americans. It challenged the belief that the West was a land of easy opportunity. Instead, it revealed something much harsher. The West was unpredictable, beautiful, and deadly. Over time, the Donner Party became one of the most famous survival stories in American history. Historians studied their journey. Writers documented their experiences, and their story became a warning about ambition, risk, and nature's power. Today, the Donner Party is remembered not just for tragedy, but for endurance, for the will to survive under impossible conditions, and for the reminder that even hope has limits when faced with nature's cruelty. The journey west was supposed to represent opportunity, a better life, a new beginning. But for the Donner Party, it became something else entirely, a journey into the unknown, where every decision mattered, and where survival came at a cost no one could have imagined. Their story remains one of the most haunting chapters in American frontier history, a reminder that the road to opportunity is never guaranteed, and sometimes the greatest danger is not the destination, but the journey itself.